Okay, welcome back. We're continuing with example 4 of the binomial expansion. Now we're moving on to the expansion of our second binomial term. Step 1, identify n term and x term. The binomial we're working with now is 2 times 2 minus x to the power of negative 1. Now notice that the constant term is not a 1, so we'll perform a manipulation so that we can use our binomial expansion. In order to get the constant term from 2 to 1, we want to divide by 2. In the first term, 2 will be 2 divided by 2. In the second term, x will be x divided by 2. Now, to compensate for that division, I want to multiply the entire expression by 2. And notice all of this is in brackets, all of this is to the power of negative 1. And so now what we have is 2 times 2 to the power of negative 1 times 2 over 2 is 1, minus x over 2 is minus 1 half x to the power of negative 1, which we can simplify one more time. 2 times 2 to the power of negative 1 is 1. So we have the binomial term 1 minus 1 half x to the power of negative 1. And now we will identify n term and x term. Our n term is negative 1. Our x term is negative 1 half x. Step 2, substitute in n term and x term. In our expansion, we have the first term of 1, next plus n times x, negative 1 times negative 1 half x. Following term, in the denominator, 2 factorial. In the numerator, n times n minus 1, negative 1 times negative 1 minus 1, all multiplied by x term to the power of 2. Our x term is negative 1 half x to the power of 2, plus final term in the denominator 3 factorial. In the numerator, n times n minus 1 times n minus 2, minus 1 times minus 1 minus 1 times minus 1 minus 2, all multiplied by the x term to the power of 3. Again, our x term is negative 1 half x to the power of 3. This is step 2 as well as step 3. We've gone out to the x cubed term. Moving on to step 4, simplify terms. Our first term is 1. Our second term is negative 1 times negative 1 half, which will be plus 1 half times x. Following term in the numerator, negative 1 times negative 1 minus 1, which is negative 1 times negative 2. That will be positive 2 over 2 factorial. 2 over 2 is positive 1, so plus 1 times. Then we're multiplying by quantity negative 1 half x to the power of 2. So negative 1 half to the power of 2 is negative 1 half times negative 1 half, positive 1 over 4. And x to the power of 2 is x squared. Next term in the numerator, negative 1 times negative 1 minus 1 times negative 1 minus 2. Negative 1 times negative 2 times negative 3 is negative 6 over 3 factorial, which is also a 6. Negative 6 over 6 is minus 1 times quantity negative 1 half x to the power of 3. Negative 1 half to the power of 3 is negative 1 over 8. And x to the power of 3 is x cubed. And our final simplification. First term 1, second term 1 half x, third term plus 1/4 x squared, and the final term negative 1 times negative 1/8 is plus 1 over 8 times x to the power of 3. And again, showing our notation that this is, in fact, an infinite series. We've simply stopped at our cubic approximation. Now we want to combine our expansions. So let's summarize the expansion of this second binomial. And now we can combine our terms with subtraction. And we'll perform the subtraction and complete the analysis of example 4 in our next video.